Hey, IACA members, did you know that you can make a motion to change the IACA? Do you have an idea to enhance the association or fix an issue? Now until May 14th, Innovative Ideas Forum is open to all members to submit and discuss ideas. Starting on Monday, May 19th, there will be a 7-day voting period on each motion. For the motion to pass, 10% of the membership, or 735 members, needs to be in favor. So if you're looking to submit an idea or be part of the discussion, please see the link to the Innovative Ideas Forum in this episode. LEA Podcast will be publishing a special episode discussing all the motions on Monday, May 19th, the start of the voting period. So if you want to be a part of that episode or you have any questions or concerns, please email us at leapodcasts@gmail.com. Now, back to the show.
Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst, or it could be whiskey with an analyst reading a spreadsheet, linking crime events, identifying a series, and getting the latest scoop on association news and training. So please don't be that analyst and join us as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
Thank you for joining me. I hope many aspects of your life are progressing. My name is Jason Elder, and today our guest has 10 years of law enforcement analysis experience, with almost 20 years of law enforcement experience overall. He spent time in both Houston, Texas, and Cleveland, Ohio. He holds a Master's of Science degree in Science, Technology, and Public Safety, and he's currently working on his PhD in Public Health. He is currently the Senior Strategist for Public Safety for the City of Cleveland. He's gone from officer turned analyst turned director. Please welcome Mike Herb. Mike, how are we doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. How is Cleveland these days?
It warmed up for a day, and now it's going back to cold, and then it'll warm up again. That's Cleveland weather for us.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I'm from northwestern Pennsylvania. I don't know if you knew that or not. So I remember those days of wild spring weather, or winter into spring, or whatever it is now at the moment. So very good. So are you a Guardians fan?
I actually grew up a Red Sox fan.
Oh, okay.
So I grew up about 2 hours away from Boston in New York. And so that I gravitated towards the Red Sox early on. But once they won a World Series, my wife is a big Guardians fan. So I kind of root for them, hoping that they'll get there someday and get their World Series too.
Yeah, well, you went through so many lean years as a Red Sox fan.
Yeah, it was tough watching us lose to the Yankees over and over and over again.
Yeah. But hey, then you got the light at the end of the tunnel, right? And that was the thing. Since now, what have they won? 3? I think, is it 3 in the last 15 years or whatever it is? So it's nice to see them finally break through. I think Cleveland actually is the next on the list of longest without winning a World Series now. So yeah, I'm with you. I hope the Guardians can break through here soon.
That's the hope.
So how did you discover the law enforcement analysis profession?
It started when I went to college originally. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do leaving high school and going into college. I originally applied to college as a math major and ended up changing over to criminal justice kind of last minute before I even started any classes. And I don't know if I had visions of being maybe an FBI agent, I think, back then.
Mm-hmm.
A little known fact about me, I was actually a Make-A-Wish kid back when I was 15 years old and had a wish granted. And my wish was to experience the FBI. So I actually got sent down there to Quantico, Virginia and Washington, D.C. at 15 years old and got to ride around with some FBI agents and see the training that they go through. And so that shaped, I guess, a little bit of my life, moving me towards and staying in the criminal justice field.
Oh, man. So you got to see Hogan's Alley?
Got to see Hogan's Alley. I was the youngest person that they had there at the time. Back then, they weren't doing tours and things. Back when I got to go down there, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, because I went down there in college, and after watching Silence of the Lambs, and that there was all that Hogan's Alley and everything else was in that movie. That had to be awesome. You said you were 15 years old?
Yeah, I had a couple brain surgeries to remove benign brain tumors when I was 12 and when I was 15, and so the wish that I had, I actually got to experience that in between the surgeries. So it
Oh,
was a
wow.
good break for me and my family as well.
Oh man, it seems that I did not know that. That wouldn't even been something I would have asked about. But I mean, obviously you're healthy now, right? This is in the rearview mirror.
Yep. Everything's in the rearview mirror, all good. They were thankfully benign brain tumors, so usually once they're able to get remove the entire tumor, generally speaking, it's a smooth sailing from there, and everything's been good on my end for sure.
How big were they?
The original one was golf ball sized.
Oh wow.
Yep. So I had started to have some medical effects from it that really mirrored epilepsy,
Mm.
and so they were convinced back then they didn't just stick you in an MRI tube and give you a diagnosis. I can't tell you how many EEGs where they tried to cause a seizure to happen and they never were able to do that. And I actually ended up getting a lucky concussion. I got a concussion. They did a CT scan from the concussion and found what they thought was a cyst at the time, and then found it to actually be an aggressively growing benign tumor. So
Yeah. Yeah. So then back then, why did you make that your wish?
I really don't know. We like my family and I reflect back on it, even just some years after, not even that long when I was in college, and we really nobody can point their finger. There's no law enforcement in the family, nothing in particular. I wasn't obsessed with different TV shows or anything like that. It just, I don't know. I don't really know what caused it to come out, but it ended up being something that for sure shaped my life, but also something that I've just enjoyed ever since then.
Yeah. So obviously you said it influenced your career, and that's a little bit of an understatement because you become a police officer at Houston PD.
Yeah, I did. So I guess I talked my way around the original question, which is how I got into it. So
Yeah.
when I went to college and was a criminal justice major, I think I had the ideas in my head of a federal law enforcement or something along those lines. And actually, my first year into my degree, I got exposed to crime analysis, something that I
Hmm.
really knew nothing about when I left
Hmm.
high school. And I really got my start, and a faculty member picked me up and put me on their Project Safe Neighborhoods grant. And so I originally started doing some data analytics in my first year in school, and
Nice.
never really looked back after that. Just kept going down that track as I got more and more involved. And that was in Rochester, New York, where I really was able to get some experience working on different grants with my faculty advisors, but also working with the city as they actually developed a crime analysis unit back then in the early 2000s.
Well, then now I'm curious, you're from the Boston area, you made it to Rochester, then how did you make it to Houston?
Yeah, that one my wife will take credit for.
Oh, okay.
We met in college and she actually went into a graduate program down in Houston, Texas. And so that took us down that way where I was looking for my first job when I finished up my master's degree.
I got you. And that's when Houston PD comes into the picture. Okay.
That was the first place that would hire me, fresh out of graduate school.
Yeah. So then that was your idea, get some years of experience as an officer and then maybe become an FBI agent.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I first moved down there, I really had aspirations and thoughts that I would be going directly into a crime analysis role. Actually,
Mm.
up north and northeast in Rochester, the analysts that they were hiring and the units that they were developing, all the analysts were civilians. When I moved down to Houston, I only knew one law enforcement contact, and I had reached out and said, where are these jobs? How are they available down here? LinkedIn wasn't a thing, so it was more challenging. And he tried to help as much as he could, but eventually he just turned around and said, "Have you thought about joining the police department? The majority of our analysts are sworn." And he jokingly said, "You come in, you'll do some time out on the streets, but they're going to realize that that's your specialty. That's what you do, and it won't be long before they take you and put you behind a desk in that analytical capacity." And that's sure enough, that's what happened. So I always joke around that I might be one of the worst policemen they had, because I don't know how much money they spend or they say they spend to train you to be out on the road, but I wasn't on the road for too long before I got a desk job with the department.
That is fascinating to think about that you went for an analyst job, but you went through all the officer training just to get that first analyst job. That is really interesting. So, because I was going to ask, because Sean Bear, he always talked about like color coding crime and categorizing crime in the squad car because he was thinking analytically when he was an officer. So that's where my head was going. I was picturing you being this patrol officer and thinking about data the whole time.
It definitely, it never left my head that that was something. And it wasn't, from my perspective, it wasn't a attempt to get out of the patrol world or out. I did some time in patrol. I did some time on the DWI task force before I took an analytical job, but it was something that I could tell in the back of my head was always still calling me, that academic type perspective of evaluating and dealing with crime, especially in a city as large as Houston.
Yeah, it definitely really large. So you leave Houston and then do you go back to school?
Yeah, we left Houston. My wife's originally from the Cleveland area in Ohio,
Okay.
and I'm up from downstate New York. And we wanted to move back closer to family. And so I actually started in a PhD program at Penn State. And that's what our attempt to get back closer to Ohio and New York was.
Start a PhD.
Right. We picked a point in the middle of families and things. Yeah. And we were there for, I think, about a year and a half and found out my wife was pregnant with twins.
Nice.
And yeah. And so I quickly realized that the PhD stipend that I was receiving to go to school full time was not going to support the family. So took the decision to go back into government work and went back and really applied for jobs in New York and in Ohio, and ultimately settled on one here in Ohio.
Wow. So you were actually at Penn State during this time?
Yeah, I was at Penn State full time. I was a full-time student for a year and a half before the twins were born.
Wow, that had to be a little cultural shock going from Houston to Happy Valley.
They say it's a college town, and that I didn't really understand it until I was there. And then all of a sudden I was like, holy smokes, there is nothing around. There's infrastructure. It's very much blue collar work. Great place, beautiful place, and I really enjoyed living there, but it was very different moving out of Houston.
Yeah, it doesn't take much to go from football stadium to cornfield.
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting driving in because you're like, we got to be lost. There's no way that there's going to be a college or a town in the next 2 miles, and then all of a sudden you come over a little hill, and then it opens up, and there it is. So,
yep.
All right. So when you're an analyst at Cleveland, you're a civilian now, right?
Yeah. The first job that I'm a civilian now in my current position, but even the first job that I took here in Ohio, I was working for Cuyahoga County's Department of Public Safety, which is a non-law enforcement agency. But I was hired in an analytical capacity, and yeah, I was a civilian employee. So that was also a change, but yeah. I felt like my time as a police officer in Houston had made me a better analyst. So I wasn't looking to get back onto a law enforcement agency, start the career all over again. I was back to looking for a civilian analyst job at the time.
Yeah. So you mentioned your time in Houston making you a better analyst. Elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think my perspective was different. I spent time in college and graduate school working with the police department in Rochester. I do some ride-alongs now and then and get a little bit of exposure to what they might be seeing out on the streets and things. But there's really, while I think that's a good experience for folks to have, especially analysts, there's really nothing that can compare to being out on the streets and answering the types of calls that I was reading reports about the next day or the next week and trying to piece together the puzzle. So being out there, hearing the calls go over the radio, having to respond and actually talking to victims and witnesses and things like that, really just it gave me it was a totally different lens to look at crime through. And especially once I started to say, okay, let me put on my analyst hat and look at things that way. So I do think it gave me a different perspective, and it made me a better analyst. It's not for everybody. I wouldn't say everybody's got to go out there and throw on a uniform and become a sworn officer. But like I said, in originally, it wasn't part of the plan. It wasn't something that I said, I have to do this to really be an analyst.
It's also interesting you being an analyst as an officer and an analyst as a civilian as well.
Yeah. when I look back on it now, especially being in Houston, I was always sworn as an analyst there, but the things that I never had to deal with here, a hurricane coming in and suddenly my desk job becoming a 16-hour a day emergency disaster recovery, putting the uniform back on and back out on the street. That was certainly something that I've never experienced. Now back into the civilian analyst world, maybe a call off hours that they need some help on something, but no natural disaster planning and changing.
So the analyst role that you have here with the county is in the prosecutor's office. Is that right?
Yeah, so I actually started with Cuyahoga County's Department of Public Safety. They had a project that they were kicking off and trying to build an analytical unit and capacity. Cuyahoga County, the county that surrounds Cleveland, is just very unique. There are 59 municipalities with 58 different municipal police departments. So there's actually no unincorporated area of the county that like the sheriff patrols or anything. They all have their own police departments.
Oh, wow.
And so when I came here, the thought was that the county would try to build out some capacity to share with those agencies. I was hired in March, and it was right after an election. And so the newly elected official came in and they didn't cancel the project or anything, but they tabled it. And I just don't really sit still very well to kind of wait for it to come back around. And so when working with the director of the county's Department of Public Safety at the time, they put me on loan over to Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office.
Oh, okay.
And so I started doing some work there, and ultimately they ended up hiring me away from the County Department of Public Safety and into the County Prosecutor's Office. Different elected official, so a little bit of a change, but ultimately I carried the title of crime analyst with the prosecutor's office.
All right. And I've had a couple of analysts on the show now that were part of a prosecutor's office. It's definitely something. Before I started this podcast, I didn't even think about a prosecutor's office needing an analyst support. So what were some of the tasks that you were assigned during your time with the prosecutor's office?
Yeah, it started off, even though I was working for the county prosecutor's office, it started off, I was actually looking a lot at the city of Cleveland and the violent crime that was occurring. The prosecutor's office, the county prosecutor's offices here in Ohio handle felony cases. So drove the boat for that, the county prosecutor's office. They led the way in violent offenses compared to the rest of the county. So but really I had direct access to Cleveland's records management system. And I started out there by just building a simple Microsoft Access database that allowed me to code reports. When I started, the Division of Police, the Cleveland Division of Police, were still handwriting reports. And so there was no back-end database to really easily go in and extract information. So
wait a minute, this is like 2016, 2017, right?
Yes, it was.
And they're still on paper reports?
They were, and things were still getting scanned in and records was still entering them, but information is easily missed, I guess you could say, when we're doing things that way. And so, I mean, I started out and said, boy, we need a database. Really, we need a records management system that can look at these things. And so as backwards, I guess, as in like the current analytical capacity would be, I started out just reading some of these violent offense reports like robberies and shootings, and coding my own data and pulling back summaries to share with prosecutors that worked the different regions and the different parts of the cities, what we were seeing as far as violence goes.
So you move on from there, then become an administrator for the county sheriff's department.
Yeah, so the project that had been tabled came back full circle, and I saw the project coming back around and actually applied. The administrator position actually was supervising now the project as they brought it back around full circle. So it was administrative in title, but really I had my hand in analysis and the projects that we were trying to launch. Now, again, we're launching them at the county level to try to help local municipal agencies. So it's not like every day I was coming in and looking at the sheriff's department reports, because as I said, there's no unincorporated area. So there's not regular patrol that's being worked by the sheriff's department. So I came in and they had the project that they were looking at 2 years before, and they hired me back as the supervisor to take on the main project and information sharing projects really that they were launching out of the county.
All right. So this brings us to your analyst badge story. And for those that may be new to the show, the analyst badge story is the career defining case or project that an analyst works. So we're here, it's around 2018, and you've set the table. We're talking about 50, 58, 59 municipalities in this one county, all these separate police departments, obviously having an issue with sharing data.
Yeah, it's something that if I tell people this, they laugh just like you did. It's something that I think is very unique that we just haven't seen. 58 municipalities or municipal police departments means 58 police chiefs. And that's just the municipal areas. We still have regional departments too, like the transit authority or the metro parks. And so between those 58 departments, there were 5 different records management systems that were used. And so we had neighboring jurisdictions that used different records management systems, and the systems didn't communicate with each other. So they could be dealing with the same criminals in many cases, I'm sure they were, and just have no idea of what type of footprint this person may be having in a neighboring community. Of course, the agencies talked with each other, but having still disparate data systems is its own challenge. Even when we're dealing with maybe 2 disparate systems, in this case, we're trying to link the entire county together. So that was the big project. That was really what I was hired to do. I was brought in, and they had already started to build out, and they had a contract with a local dispatch center actually to build out a data warehouse, ultimately to bring together records management system data from these different municipalities and put it into one location and host it. In 2018, these solutions existed. There were private companies that did this, but every time we looked around and tried to think about getting a quote, they would look at how many police agencies we had in the county, how many sworn police officers we have, and you can imagine how expensive the bill got. It was millions of dollars, and we just didn't have that money. So contracting with a local dispatch center that used their IT folks to really build out a warehouse, that was what I was brought in for, and that's what led to me 58 police chiefs. That was 58 meetings of sitting down one-on-one with the police chief and really trying to gain their trust and selling myself as much as selling the project to get them. I had to get them to release and be okay with others seeing their data. That's always a challenge in law enforcement, but also understanding that not just others are going to be seeing it, but we as the county or the county sheriff's department, we're going to have to be in there and really pulling back the veil to make sure that the data is clean when it's going into this system. And so it was a big project, but it's something that when I left the sheriff's department, I was really proud of the fact that we had accomplished it. Things have changed since I left, of course. The times have progressed. Other systems have been looked at, but I think the county as a whole, because of that project, is in a better place communication-wise between the many agencies and many chiefs and folks that are there.
So did you end up building it in-house?
Yeah, so it was built. So it was a local dispatch center, Chagrin Valley Dispatch, that we actually contracted. The county contracted with them, and they built out initially a shell of a system. The contract was in place before I came over. I came back to the county from the prosecutor's office and saw it. And one of the things that I noticed that we were really missing, if we're going to truly try to share information between police departments, we were missing narratives to police reports. You know, if we're trying to figure out what's really going on in a case, the basic identifiers of people and things like that doesn't really tell the story. And so when I came in and they were like, look, here, we've built it. This is what we were tasked with doing. I said, this isn't good enough. This isn't the end solution for what we need to be giving the municipal agencies. And so we actually went back to the drawing board of what they thought was a product that was ready to be released. I pumped the brakes on and said, nope, we've got to do better. The county has had a reputation of dropping the ball on projects before, and I don't want this to come out and not be the best product that we can make it. And so, yeah, we pumped the brakes, pulled it back, really went through, reevaluated what data was going to be in this, how we were going to share it. And like I said, I was out doing the traveling roadshow, selling what we were doing and talking about its importance before we actually went live with the system.
Yeah, because it obviously to make that call, you're going to have to explain why we're doing it, right? People are like, if it's ready, let's launch it. I can just imagine, I can just hear the conversation. You are obviously were able to successfully articulate your reasons for pumping the brakes.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting conversation when I tried to come in, because I was really an analytical unit of one. I was brought in as the administrator to run the project, and I get in, and within the first month, I'm like, I know you think this is a great finished, polished product, but it's not good enough. And so the hundreds of thousands of dollars that were spent, at the end, we were going to put out the same product. A product was going to go out regardless of when we did it. So I really didn't want to rush into something that I thought we would be judged poorly on, or that folks would see it and be like, where's the value added? Because I didn't think we had it at the time.
Yeah. So thinking about it now and looking back, what were maybe some of the bigger roadblocks? And that could be any realm of things, whether that's people, agencies, data, technology. Where were some of the major roadblocks with this project?
Yeah, I mean, I won't name names, but I definitely walked into some meetings to pitch the project, and some of the first things out of folks' mouths were, how's the county going to fail us now? And so I was fighting a battle that I didn't know the history of, right? I was coming into a project and the county trying to launch something that would span municipalities, and I didn't know that there had been previous projects, not necessarily to this degree of what we were trying to accomplish, but that they felt that the county had, I don't want to say mismanaged, or just had let the wheels fall off of whatever the project was. And so it was a lot of the meetings that I went to was really trying to convince folks that I was a different person. I am not from the county, and I have a different background, and this is the way I'm approaching it. And I really was not going to accept any type of drop in the ball or failure from my perspective. But those were some tough conversations to have. And some chiefs grilled me more than others as to what I was going to do. What am I going to do if I run into this scenario or that scenario? Or they'd start asking legal questions. And I'm not an attorney, so I had to do a lot of, I'll get back to you. Or by the time I got maybe 20 chiefs in, I was pretty prepared on the legal questions and ready to answer with how we had addressed the legal issues or potential hurdles that were in the way of just sharing the data that we wanted to share.
Yeah. So you have one county, 58 municipalities. Was this a mandate? Was somebody over top of these 58 saying like, "Hey, we're going to do this," or did they have the option of opting out?
Yeah, they absolutely had the option to opt out the entire time. There was nothing that required them to participate, but part of the selling was, hey, the county is footing the bill for this. I don't need you or your department or your officers to do anything any differently. We were working with the records management system vendors to pull this data into one location. So other than telling us, yeah, you've got our blessing to do this, we didn't need them to change how they were entering records or anything like that. So part of the reason it came about is there's a unique, obscure law in the Ohio Revised Code that basically says if you are in a county where you have a certain number, and I don't recall the number, but a very high number of municipal police agencies, every moving violation conviction in that county, a $5 fee is to be added onto the ticket, and it has to be used for information sharing. So it's a very strange revenue generating system, and the funds have to be used for a very specific purpose. And so that actually is what was funding the project. So I was able to come in, the municipal agencies, through their regular operations of writing traffic tickets, and there definitely is no, hey, go write more tickets so we can do more with this money. That's not how it was working. It just, that fee was mandated in the Ohio Revised Code. It had been like that for years. And to be honest with you, Cuyahoga County and its unique number of municipalities is the only one in the state of Ohio that fits, that has that fund and that funding source. So So yeah, so it was optional for everybody, but it was being funded. The county was able to come in and I was able to say, hey, I don't need you to do anything any different and you're not going to pay for anything. I just need you to give us the okay to work with your vendor to pull back the information. So a lot of MOUs, legal MOUs, obviously, between the county and the individual police agencies, but they were the ones signing off. And if I didn't have an MOU, they weren't coming into the system.
Yeah. I seem to remember some odd rules. And when I was spent time at Cincinnati, and I
Mhm.
think you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think the state of Ohio requires employers to actually give every employee a paper pay stub. Like you can't make that fully
Yeah,
electronic.
so I think you can't, if the person opts to keep it electronic, they can, but you can't force them. So I know
Okay.
some folks, especially in the policing world, that are like, nope, I want my printed pay stub. I will never opt or give it. And I don't know what they do with
Maybe,
them, but
yeah, yeah, maybe they did. Because I remember I always got one, and I'm like, why do I don't need this. It's direct deposit. So what are you
right,
doing? Why are you doing handing it to me? Can't I get this electronically? But anyway,
right.
that is obviously some obscure rules there. So, and every state has. But in terms of the opt out, did any municipalities opt out?
Nobody opted out.
Hmm.
We had some holdups
Hmm.
that were a little bit cautious and reserved about releasing their information and kind of letting us at it, so to speak, to bring it together. Cleveland being a big one.
Hmm.
Now, of the 5 records management systems, they were a municipality that had a records management system that no one else had. So it was
Hmm.
going to be a unique partnership that had to work to bring their data into the system. We never got there while I was there. We had a very positive relationship. I'd like to think that through this process, we really built up a good communication relationship that has allowed, while the system is not in its state like it was when I was there and we were building it, I think the communication and the sharing of information has had a lasting impact from that project and from all the outreach that was done.
Now that is interesting. You're a team of one, and obviously is quite an endeavor dealing with all those personalities, all those municipalities. You talked about the legal aspects to the whole thing. That is obviously something that's quite to say it's a project is probably a disservice. That is really impressive.
It was fun. It was definitely, like you said, with the badge story. I don't look it back at it and say I was that was the most successful thing ever in the country, anything like that. It just the challenges that came with it, the things that I learned through that process, they certainly were nothing that I would have ever forecast that I'd be working on or that would have come down the pipe from my time anywhere else previous in my career of the things I was doing. So
This is Erin Wickersham, and my public service announcement is to go on a court along. You may have been on a ride along, and I think someone else recommended a 911 operator sit along. So find a prosecutor in your jurisdiction and see if you can go to court with them. You'll learn a lot about the process and about the work that they're doing.
Hi, this is Patrick Baldwin, former Director of Crime Analysis for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I had 2 managerial axioms when I was the director. You're either in or you're out. I never liked people dabbling in my business. You had you wanted to work with something, then you're all in. And the other one was stay in your lane. As an analyst, there's lots of people doing work. Stay in your own lane.
All right. So, as you mentioned, you did leave the sheriff's department and you take a director's role with the Northeast Ohio Regional Fusion Center.
yeah, so I step away really from the analytical work that I was doing with the sheriff's department and the design and build out and move over into the world of Homeland Security. And I take over a fusion center, which covers Northeast Ohio. At the time, it covered 5 counties to include the Cleveland area, the greater Cleveland area, and Cuyahoga County. And I went from being an administrator with the sheriff's department and supervising an analyst over there to really running an entire center with multiple analysts. And from the time I was there, we had 2.5 analysts. I had a part-time critical infrastructure analyst that was there. And when I left, we had 7 people in the office. So we really grew and expanded in that time.
Nice. So I like to ask questions of the managers that I have on the show, just different hiring practices. Like when you're hiring an analyst, what are some things that you're looking for? Do you have standard interview questions, for instance?
Yeah, as far as like standard questions, I do have a standard grouping of questions that I would ask. Some were generic and have transcended hiring I've done of crime analysts and homeland security analysts. So there's a little bit of difference, but at the end of the day, there's analytical components to what they're doing. And then others got more specific into the field that they were actually looking at. Something unique that I had in the Fusion Center, none of the analysts actually worked for me. I was a director of a regional shop, and all of the analysts had a parent agency that they came from to me.
Oh, okay. So they were assigned to you.
They were assigned to me, yeah. So when it came down to some of the administrative functions, I had the administrative rules and operating manual that I wrote for the Fusion Center that also had to coincide with whatever types of rules and regulations they had with the agency that they came from. And so I had people from Cuyahoga County's Department of Public Safety, the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Department, the City of Cleveland Division of Police, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. So I had all these folks in one area and made hirings from these respective agencies. And so I had different processes depending on where I was, but I carried that book of questions with me from place to place.
And I think it's interesting now that you're at the director level, because obviously when you're a supervisor or a manager of analysts, you're hiring but you're not team building per se, right? And somebody's probably going to disagree with me on that, but where I'm getting at is when you get under that director's role, you're building the team, and it seems to me like it's more strategic as opposed to when you're a supervisor or middle manager. Executives are really doing a lot of the strategic planning, but when you're in that director role, you are strategic planning and putting a team in place and doing a little bit of management. Do you agree, or am I off?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a unique role that I stepped into, and I would agree 100% with that. I came in, they hadn't had a full-time director in over a year, but that director position reports to an actual governance board that covers. And so I was a City of Cleveland employee on paper, and I always explain somebody had to pay and give benefits to that position. But ultimately, my boss was 13 individuals from across the 5 counties. And so when I walked in there, it was a little bit of a shock because I said, boy, they expect me to have some magical vision of what I want this center to do. And that really ran the gambit from developing a policy manual to figuring out how I was going to fund the center to, hey, I think we could add this capacity to the office. And if we were adding it, that meant I had to sell it to the team, but it also meant I had to find the funding if there was a software need or a need for a new tool. And so I stepped into things that I couldn't even envision in the lead up to taking the job. So, but yeah, it was a different perspective than just supervising an analyst and maybe feeling like I was guiding the ship to all of a sudden feeling like it was me. I was steering the entire ship as to where we were going to go and what our vision was going to be.
So you're there just shy of 5 years. So what are you most proud of, or what do you think you accomplished during this time?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely most proud of the growth that we had in the center. Like I said, we started with 2.5 individuals that were up there. And when I was leaving, we had grown. I had agencies that had added staff to the center that had never had a staff member in the center. I had over $1 million in grant funds that had come in to the office for grants that I wrote. And we had taken on so much with the increased number of personnel. Our requests had gone from, I'm going to butcher the numbers and my analysts will be mad at me, but we had gone from somewhere around 1,000 requests a year, requests for support, to over 3,000. And so in 5 years, the growth that we saw and the partnerships that were built with those agencies is I was most proud of that. When I walked away after the 5 years, I felt like it wasn't something that I was like, oh, I put my name on it. No, I just felt like I got it into a place where folks felt it was a trusted resource. They were willing to support it, whether it was voting to award some of the grant money, some Homeland Security grant money to the center, or if it was putting personnel up there. I felt like when I was walking away, I had good relationships that were built and there was trust in the center and how it was operating.
Yeah. So it sounds like you left it better than you found it.
That's certainly how I felt.
So hey, and you're getting a little better. You went from 58 that you have to deal with down to 13. So that's a little bit of an improvement. So that brings us to where you are now, which, as I mentioned in your intro, you are the senior strategist for public safety for Cleveland.
Yeah, yep. It was a position that I don't know that I fully knew what I was walking into.
Mm-hmm.
I understood, I guess, to some extent where senior strategists fit in the business world, but not as much in local government. And so for me, it was, I think I said before, I was a city employee already being the fusion director. So it really was like a lateral movement for me on paper. And I actually had the same boss the entire time. It was always the city of Cleveland safety director. But coming over to this position, I'm starting to branch out into fields that I really have never had regular interactions with, because the Department of Public Safety for the city of Cleveland includes the divisions of police, fire, EMS, and animal care and control. So while I have a heavy law enforcement background, and that division is what gets probably the biggest lens from the public perspective, I'm having to learn some more about these other divisions that I haven't previously really had any experience with.
Yeah. So what are your major objectives, or what maybe some of the projects that you're working on?
Yeah. So one of the big ones I walked into under our current mayor, Justin Bibb, he really pushed for opening up the information that we have across the city, making the city more transparent. And so they started with a department out of the mayor's office called Urban Analytics and Innovation. And they were tasked with going through the city department by department and building out dashboards and maps and things that would allow the city to share its information, things from public works all the way to public safety. And so when I walked in the door, I was told, hey, Urban AI, as they're known, has built a bunch of these dashboards, and this is how we're sharing information with the public. And I went in, saw what was built, was like, this is great, but it needs to be better. And so one of the first tasks that I took on when I came in was trying to improve one of they have many dashboards, so I'm certainly not going to say that I built the entire thing. I built one map, but it was the one that I came in and said, from an analyst perspective, what is it that any citizen is going to want to be able to do? And it was the thing that I felt was missing was a more robust mapping component that really allowed somebody to go in, draw a shape around a particular area, a neighborhood in the city of Cleveland, and figure out what's going on in this area. And so that really ate up a good chunk of my first couple months, because I'd been out of the analytical game for a little while. And so suddenly I found myself having to go back in and recreate a map and remember how to build it out and add some features to it, work through some bugs. Thankfully, the folks at Urban AI and their team there were fantastic. A lot of support helping me get through that process. But at the end of the day, that was something that I did not foresee being the task of the job, but something that I think even in the however many months it's been now, I think I went over in August. So 7-8 months. It's something that I'm very proud of that we built out and have launched, and really I'm doing a traveling roadshow for that right now too, trying to get folks to understand that we're putting the data in their fingertips. So that was a big project that I walked into right off the rip.
Yeah, I would imagine that the folks in the area that are asking for this are older in nature, and yet that's also the population that struggles the most with technology. So you have this gadget, as you said, the mapping, the website for them to go to. So I imagine that there's a pretty big learning curve showing these folks how to use the system.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I say I'm out doing the traveling roadshow.
Mhm.
Let's build some features into it. It's easy to go in and run a little filter to do some predefined boundaries like the police districts or the city council wards. But yeah, the more complicated geocoding things that can be done, shapes being drawn and drawing those things out, that's really what I'm out there doing. And so I'm out there in person for some of these. Other times I'm just doing Teams meetings and things like that and sharing my screen and showing folks how they can really work with that. And that's gone across the board from I've met with folks from Cleveland Public Library to the Cleveland Metropolitan School Districts and really trying to show some of the business organizations that the power's in their hands. They can make a public records request to the city, but that takes some time to go through, review, figure out what the return is going to be or what it can be from the city versus, hey, we can put it in your fingertips and we can put it out there. It just went live in January, and I'm hoping here in the next month to really build out a short video that really goes over the capabilities, components, and that little bit of the how-to. So that I'll never take away the face-to-face or the presentations that I do. I think that's good community building with folks to understand really what the city's doing to share this data and to analyze this data, but certainly making it so that somebody can go to that site blind and figure out what they're doing, I think is where we're headed.
As we're talking about data sharing, is the line of what to share and what not to share clear, or is there a pretty good debate over what should be shared and what shouldn't be shared?
I think it's pretty clear now.
Mhm.
I've been talking with folks as I've done these presentations, and I've done them for some analysts that are in other fields or working with private sector partners, and they want to see the data that's available for the city. I think it's pretty clear in most cases as to where we have to draw the line as far as protecting law enforcement investigations and protecting victims of crimes, things like that. And there will always be the critics that say we're trying to hide something or we're trying to put up a wall between us. But the reality is my boss, the safety director, Mayor Bibb, the chief of police are all on board with, hey, how can we open this up to everybody that's out there? How can we make reports even from the chief's office? How can we make reports that are accessible by any citizen, but also that our own command staff can use to generate their own statistics? So even getting away from, we have to build these reports and things internally to just, hey, whatever the citizens can see or whatever our command staff can see, it should all be the same as far as statistics. Where are the crimes happening? What are the patterns? If somebody's out there and they really want to dive into it, we want to make that available to them.
Yeah. It seems to me a lot is made out of camera footage, whether that's a city camera or that's officer cameras on the officers. That seems to be the big thing. Some incident happens and then they want all camera footage. Is that something that you're getting into, or is it more the reports that you mentioned previously?
Yeah, it's the reports for me. I see the volume that have come in, and actually if you look at the state of Ohio, Governor DeWine has pushed forward, I don't think it's finalized yet, but pushed forward legislation that would charge folks that are requesting the camera footage, because the request numbers are so high. That is a labor intensive thing to do, because we can't just release the entire camera footage. If they're talking to a victim that's on the body cam or on the camera footage, then that's going to be held back as part of the investigation. So it's a process. And so, I mean, to me, it makes sense as to where we're trying to say, look, we'll make it as transparent as possible, but there's only so many hours in the day and only so many people we can hire to help release that. But yeah, the camera footage, the demands are very, very high.
Yeah. And you talked about going around, and I think that's something that's, I think slowly the public, I think, is realizing why are you not releasing the video right away? Well, I mean, you have to go through it and touch on some of the stuff that you were talking about, making sure that there's not something that shouldn't be released for one reason or another. And it's not necessarily about CYA, but I mean that's where a lot of people will jump to. But and you understand that. I've been impressed recently with it. It's usually not more than like a day or two. I've seen police departments is like it's like a day or two after the police involved shooting and they have the video released. So it's in certain situations, it's not like it's weeks or months, it's days.
No, yeah, that's definitely the direction that I think everyone's going across the country, which is they know the demand is going to be high and they want to, if officers are doing what they're not supposed to be doing, they want to show that just as much as they want to show if officers are doing all the right things. So the video release process for some of these more serious cases, whether it's officer involved shootings or just things that have a high political motivation, they are pushing those out as fast as possible.
Yeah. So what's next for your position? What's coming down the road?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of development of just what we're talking, what the title talks about, a little bit more of the strategic look at how we can address safety problems in the city. So last year, my predecessor worked and developed a summer safety plan that really took a whole of government approach. They went out and really took all the departments from the city and made a lot of contacts with residents and tried to address all types of issues from crime to quality of life and tried to see what impact they could have. Ultimately, the crime numbers dropped substantially from the summer months from 2023 to 2024. And so right now it's working to try to prepare for this summer and take on the next safety plan or strategically look at how the summer can be as safe as possible for our city residents.
All right. Well, let's move on then. I want to talk a little bit about the IACA because you recently participated in the special election for VP of Administration. And it's interesting. I have a wall of names that of people that have suggested to be guests on the show. And you, embarrassingly enough, your name's been up there for a while and I just did not got the invite out. And then I see your name as one of the 6 running for the special election. So I thought, oh, what better time to get you on than now. So I'm curious, first off, is what was your motivation to throwing your name in the hat for the position?
I think like the other candidates that put their name in, we want nothing more than to see the association succeed and support analysts across the world. And whether they're at the beginning of their career, the end of their career, the middle of their career, I think that we probably, the 6 of us, would all agree that we have had good experiences with and gotten good resources from the IACA. And so from my perspective, I've been out of the game for a while for the day-to-day analytical components to the job. But what I saw was a parallel to what I had done when I was in the Fusion Center and came in a little bit blind and figured out, all right, we've got policies that need to be updated. Where can I find the support to go out and find somebody that can help with these types of things? And so what I saw or heard from members were a desire to update some policies and the review process, things like that. And so I was candid when I threw my name out there of just, I may not be the right candidate for it, but I felt that what my background was and what I had just done in the previous 5 years was maybe something that could be supportive to where we're trying to go.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. It definitely is. And I think one of the things is that the association has grown to 7,000 members and it might have grown faster. It's just gone through some growing pains of growing too fast. And you still have just 5 people on the executive board trying to manage this whole thing. And more needs to be done. And I think it's just the point that you're making is bylaws need to be updated, rules and regulations need to be updated. There's needs to be more of a checks and balances system. I think the association is eventually going to get there. So to take the snapshot now is definitely an incomplete picture at the moment. But it was obviously some things happened in the fall and and earlier this year that have been disappointing.
Yeah. It's like I said, I was coming into it a little bit blind. I hadn't been paying. I've been a member of the IACA for a number of years and am certified law enforcement analyst. So I'd gone through that several years ago, but I felt in the one sense, not knowing the full story to some extent, and just being able to maybe look at the bylaws and say, okay, where are we behind, so to speak, because the bylaws have been there. It's not like they were without bylaws, but the fusion center was the same when I came in. I saw a place that had bylaws that were 10 years old, and of course, technology's changed, operations have changed, roles have changed, and we just can't survive on adding little patches to bylaws and regulations and things like that over the years. They really have to be evaluated regularly.
Yeah. It's interesting. I have to do some research on this, but IALEA just had their elections recently, and they have 11 folks on the board there, and 7 of the 11 are certified, and which I thought was incredibly high and impressive. And I got this again. I haven't done the research. I was like, I'm pretty sure. I don't know if anybody's certified that's on the board now. And it got me thinking how far back I'd have to go before I would get somebody that's certified. I didn't do it's just I'm just thinking off the cuff here. I didn't do it, but I didn't actually do the research. But it doesn't seem like that many people that are on the executive board are actually certified.
Yeah, I that one I couldn't answer. I know a handful of people that are certified or have gone through the certification over the years, but I've met different folks. Annie Mitchell, I met. She actually came to town when she was over membership and for a small conference that we had here. And so knew her from previous interactions. But other than that, yeah, I'm not as familiar with everybody that's on the board currently.
So there is going to be opportunities to help out and improve the association. So be on the lookout. All right, let's get to the advice section then. And so we've gone through your career thus far. And so what advice do you have for our listeners, whether that would be maybe folks looking to get into the analyst field or maybe just starting out as analysts or experienced analysts? What advice do you have for them?
The first thing I've had this conversation with people over lots of different careers is just that imposter syndrome is a real thing. And there has not been a job that I have taken that I didn't immediately within the first week look at myself and go, am I even qualified to do this job that I have taken on? And I think that reflection that I have at the beginning of each of these positions really helps me sit down and try to define what is the role going to be and what do I bring to the table. The idea I had in my head of what that job might be that I don't feel like I'm qualified for, I almost need that quick panic moment to force me to really dive into that job and say, all right, there are some unique perspectives that I bring to this job, and I need to stop trying to define the job to the letter before I even get there. So that's first and foremost, I think, for me. Another piece of advice that I have for everybody is to never stop trying to learn. Of course, I say that as I'm back in school at Kent State in this PhD program. I would recommend if you're going to go back for your PhD, maybe do that before your kids get older or after they are moved out of the house, because what started out okay when the kids were little just became more and more challenging the more activities they have going on. But yeah, I mean, that's what drew me back into school is my desire to really just keep learning new ways to approach problems. It's a PhD in public health, so it's really I'm looking at crime through again another lens, just like I did from a law enforcement perspective. Now, sometimes I'm looking at it through a public health lens. But that desire to keep learning is just putting more skills in my pocket. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be for certifications or degrees, but try to keep challenging yourself, I think is a great lesson that I've benefited from over my career.
All right, very good. Well, you just mentioned the PhD program that you're going through, so let's explore that a little bit. What exactly are you hoping for?
That's a great question. I'm not sure I know what I'm hoping for yet. I guess I've always been in and around in my current job, and really in the last 10 years that I've been working here in Ohio, been in and around academic partners. been doing research, or it's been a component of some of the work that I've done.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of those research partners eventually twisted my arm enough that I think I said, that sounds like a good idea to go back and finish the degree that I had started when I was in a PhD program at Penn State, and have gotten back into it. It's a long process, obviously. I think I'm in my 4th year, but I get to keep working with the same academic partners. Different research opportunities have come up from those partnerships. I get a chance to teach college classes. So for now, I don't know that anything would change. I finished the degree, and I don't have any intention of just packing up shop from the government and going right into academia or anything. But I think it's opened more doors than it has closed them. Of course, it's been a painful process. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. It's almost something. I was way done once I was finishing up my master's. So I was like, I don't want to read another textbook ever again. So I'm always impressed when I hear analysts go on to get their PhD, because I know I can't even begin to understand how much more work it is beyond the master's, because I thought the master's was grueling.
Yeah, it was definitely, when I was in my first semester, I knew it would be a sink or swim thing. So the fall semester came, and I said, I'm either going to love this or I'm going to hate it. I'm either going to hate being back in a classroom, or I'm going to love challenging my brain and looking at things. The PhD's in public health, so I'm a criminologist through and through, and it's a little bit of a different perspective. So it was a good challenging. That fall semester turned into the next several years.
Right. Well, talk a little bit about your thesis and your project.
Yeah, so a lot of the work that I'm working on right now is focused around the opioid epidemic. So the dissertation will really start more full swing into it next year. But I guess when I was doing my master's degree, I probably, like other people, weren't sitting there and saying, oh, I have a topic ready to go that I'm going to write my thesis on for my master's. With the PhD, because I'm older and I was coming in, I already had those academic partners. I said, these are things I'm passionate about that could fit the bill in the public health department, right? Not every topic is going to work. But I've been so heavily involved in supporting the partners that we have for the opioid epidemic that it really was a natural fit to slide some things that I'd been doing for work now into the degree. And that'll be a long process. It's not like I have something ready to go, but I have an idea of things they're formulating. There's data available. We just have quite a problem here in Northeast Ohio and really all over the United States of non-fatal overdoses and fatal overdoses of folks that are just being impacted by the opioid epidemic, that it's ripe for research and partnerships and all the work that's going into the degree that'll culminate with a project involving it.
I think you said during the prep call the idea of treating like crime as a disease.
Yeah.
And
So
that vantage from coming at it at the opioid epidemic from that vantage point.
yeah, I mean, that's part of my advisor in the program is a criminologist. That's where he comes from. And of course, he's in the College of Public Health. And so one of the things that we look at, in addition to what I'm looking at for my thesis, but a topic is just how to look at violence specifically, really, as a public health problem, right? So how can we look at that almost like the spread of a disease, and how we would treat another type of epidemic that might be breaking out. And so that's a perspective that, after being in the field for years, I never necessarily went down that path to even think about it. The public health department opened my eyes to it, and now I see even more opportunities to really educate both sides, because I find in law enforcement and criminology, it's not something that's often thought about. And then even in the public health sector, getting them to understand, people in the public health sector, that it's a mutually beneficial relationship between criminal justice and public health that I don't think is exploited or explored enough. So it's been an eye-opening process for me, for sure.
In the couple of documentaries that I've watched, so I'm definitely not an expert thing, but on the opioid epidemic, it does seem it's just the right place at the right time aspect to the epidemic, meaning that this was able to flourish because no one was really looking for it. No one was able to really track it. We had people writing prescriptions and no one tracking the prescriptions, so they were just being able to be produced. And obviously the drug manufacturers were making all these drugs, and So hopefully we'll never something like this won't ever happen again, or at least won't happen exactly like this. But at the same time, there was this point in time where it just went on and on and on and didn't get picked up right away.
Yeah, it definitely, I mean, that's why you've started to see, and actually there was a class action lawsuit here in Cuyahoga County in Northern Ohio where they sued the pharmaceutical companies and won. We actually had a settlement here, or I guess I shouldn't say won, there was a settlement, and hundreds of millions of dollars have been poured into the area to take that different aspect. And it's not necessarily law enforcement. Most of it's health and human services. How do we treat people that are on the wrong side of the epidemic? But yeah, I mean, we're starting to see in higher numbers the prescription companies be held accountable for what their role was in the spread of the epidemic.
I guess from the analyst point of view and maybe a listener to this show, what would your advice be of maybe how an analyst could leverage the healthcare side of things or work with healthcare professionals?
Well, first and foremost, I think if you're trying to get outside of the healthcare investigators, right? Some folks have easy ties. We have a very strong hospital district here in Cleveland. And so a lot of them have their own police departments. And so that's a way to get in the door. But for me, like my exposure to a lot of this stuff came from finding that first academic partner that nobody was making money. It's not like I was getting paid as a subject matter expert. The university wasn't getting a huge contract or money from the government, but it was just like an exploratory thing. And it was a good exposure to now, hey, of course, the first time I talked to him, it was criminology related. I'm not from Ohio, so I was just getting to know people in the area. And then it turned into, hey, I think you have a unique perspective and you might be able to help us look at this opioid problem. We've got this other research going on. And then that just flourished, and it became, suddenly I had my hand in the problem and was helping out and meeting folks in the healthcare industry, but meeting folks in public health, folks in other parts of the government. And really all started with that first friendship and relationship that I had with the university that I never went to, but I've now have affiliations with and actually partnered with them. And we won some federal grants, Homeland Security grants, to almost $500,000 that I got purely out of partnering with someone that I was working with at a university.
Cool. Well, good luck with your PhD in the program, and here's to being the future Dr. Herb.
Thanks.
All right, so let's finish up with words to the world. This is where you can promote any idea that you wish. Mike, what are your words to the world?
I think my words to the world are to try to build those partnerships. Obviously, I was just talking about public health, but it really has to do with everything. Those partnerships make or break things that we're doing in the field, whether that's the private sector, the public sector, universities. Everybody plays a role in dealing with any of the problems that we look at, right? Health and safety. And so I can't tell you how many times now, after working in all these different states with folks and then bouncing around here in Cuyahoga County around the Cleveland area, where something will come up and inevitably I'm able to say, has anybody talked to this person? And it almost comes across like a thinking outside the box, but it really just comes down to I've tried my hardest to build partnerships in every sector of the field, and it's a networking thing, right? It's obviously beneficial for folks to get around in the field, but it's also we're doing good work when we're able to cross communicate and join up with these partners.
Very good. Will I leave every guest with you've given me just enough to talk bad about you later? But I do appreciate you being on the show, Mike. Thank you so much, and you be safe.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you for making it to the end of another episode of Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. You can show your support by sharing this and other episodes found on our website at www.leapodcasts.com. If you have a topic you would like us to cover or have a suggestion for our next guest, please send us an email at leapodcasts@gmail.com. Till next time, analysts, keep talking.